Hello, welcome to the OpenStack fundamental tutorial, and I am Tridivesh Chakravarti, your instructor. And in the first part, we will be seeing the introduction to cloud. So in this, we'll see what is cloud computing, what are all the essential characters for cloud computing, and how you can differentiate between cloud computing and traditional computing, and then what are the models, deployment models and service delivery models are there in cloud computing, so that you can understand how the cloud computing works and how it's being used. So let's start with what is cloud computing. So cloud computing nothing but it delivers you the computing services. So computing services means here like you want to have a server or you want to have your network or storage database software. So these kind of things you get it from a cloud provider over internet. So this is important part, that these things are available over internet, so it can be anywhere else and you can access them. And also in this case one more distinct characteristics is that you have minimum assistance required from the service provider. So what does mean? Suppose in a traditional computing way, if you need a server, you have to go back to your administration team or IT team, request them for the server, and it takes some time for them to build it and then give it back to you. But in case of cloud computing, where you have already various server images available, you just go and select that image. You no need to wait for them, so it is speed up the entire process. And then here, and because of that, you have the more control over what you need and how you want to use. So you build your server by yourself, you use it, and if you don't want to shut down it or delete that, you no need to wait for someone else. So it gives you more control over entire your infrastructure, and as you have your control, you do by yourself, and when you want you shut down the server or when you want you power on the server. So these things make it more cheaper than in your traditional computing service. So here how much you use, you pay for them, which at the end of the day reduce your cost to run the business, and also you no need to pay for unused resources, or if you are paying also it will be very minimum in that case. And as already I have told that you do by yourself and you no need to wait for someone else to build it up, or you can automate that deployment or the deletion of your resources and all those things. This brings the agile methodology where your entire service delivery became very fast. And cloud computing by default implements CI/CD. So CI/CD means here continuous improvement and continuous delivery. So that also is possible in cloud computing. And at the end I want to say you that the companies who provide you the cloud computing services are called cloud service providers. So here you can have some examples like AWS from Amazon and Azure from Microsoft. So they are the distinct cloud service providers. Also Google Cloud is there. So they are also providing you cloud computing services. So as you know what is cloud computing, now we will be seeing what are essential characters in cloud computing. So first character is a self-service. So as already I have told you that you have more control over your infrastructure and what are service you want to use. So this allows customers to provision as per their requirement from the computing resources available in your cloud service provider. And also it enables you to have a global network access. So what is that? Suppose you want to deploy your application where you want to have localized website available for various regions in your entire world. So suppose someone is accessing from Europe, you will have access from the Europe content. So this is possible in your cloud where you will have multiple region for your multiple section of the world to access that, and this can be done via internet. So they will have the access over internet. And also it has one more distinct characteristics, that is that multi-tenancy. What that means, so here you no need to think about the underlying infrastructure or hardware. So here everyone uses the same hardware. So you may have a big server in cloud provider side, so he may have their 200 GB of RAM, 600 of CPUs, so that will be shared among the customer. So you no need to think of like, okay, that hardware is only dedicated for a particular customer. That is possible, but still in the normal scenario it will be shared. And also it gives you the elasticity. What that means, suppose whenever you require more computing resources or computing power, you can scale out your infrastructure, or when you don't need that much of high computing power, you can scale in. So that allows you to satisfy your demand and scale in or scale out accordingly. And at the end, the very distinctive characteristic of cloud, and this is very much required also there. So telemetry. So as I already told you, here you use and then you pay. So as you are using that much you are paying. So in a cloud, all the resources can be monitored and metered as per the usage. So this helps the cloud providers to bill you accordingly for your usage. So as you know what is cloud computing and what are the essential characters. So now you may think how it is different between your traditional workloads where you have server client architecture or you deploy by yourself in your data center, and the cloud workload. So before that you should know what is the traditional workload. So in traditional workload or data center virtualization also you can say has been very common in computing industry, and you may find that in almost in everywhere, and it uses the client server architecture. So where you deploy some servers, you set up the service on that server, and then you give access to those services to the client to consume. So here as I already told you that you configure the machine and then you build the entire workload on that. So one machine is dedicated for particular one workload, so that is not shared. And when workload increases, so what you do, you scale up your infrastructure. So suppose you have one server running with 100 GB of CPU, 100 CPUs and 200 GB of RAM, and you are running out of CPU. In that case, what you do, you add extra CPU to cope with that demand. And whereas if you don't need that much of computing power, you again reduce the CPU or memory or disk. So here one thing you need to remember, you need a downtime to increase the CPU and memory or reduce those resources. So this is the characteristics of your traditional workload. Now when you go into that cloud workload, so cloud workload requires the entire design to be changed of the application. Why? Because the application uses a distributed architecture. So in a normal traditional workload, you don't have a distributed architecture application. You install that application on a particular server and then you start using them. But in case of cloud, that may not be the case, where you will have the application running on multiple instances and serving to the client. And in cloud, what happens, your application has the failover or scaling in scaling out capability to match the demand, whereas in a traditional workload that failover and scaling up capabilities are there in the infrastructure, not in the application. So here you do scale out or scale in your application to match the demand. So what is that scale out or scale in means? Like suppose you have application running on one instances and then you have a higher demand, you add new instances and you scale out your application portfolio. But whereas if you don't need that much of computing power, you then again reduce one or two instances and scale in, so that you don't pay extra money for your cloud usage. And this thing can be automated and also this thing can be online, so you don't need any downtime, and this online is possible because of the architecture change in your application, which can online add extra instances to its running application and serve you. So as you saw the differences between traditional workload and cloud workload, then we'll see how there are different deployment models in cloud. So the very first thing comes in the cloud is the public cloud. So what is the public cloud? Is nothing but is a cloud service running in a public space where anyone can go and opt for that and deploy their infrastructure or application or whatever. And this entire infrastructure of this public cloud is managed by the cloud provider. So here example will be like AWS or Amazon. They are like public cloud. Whereas in contrast to that deployment model, you have private cloud. So in private cloud, what happens? You have your own cloud setup in your own data center. So it entire that infrastructure of the cloud managed by your own IT team. So this called private cloud. So still you have a cloud capability available with you, but entirely managed by yourself, not by the cloud provider. So that called private cloud. And the very last of deployment model is a hybrid cloud. So this is a very common model where some of your workload runs on your public cloud, some of your workload runs on your private cloud. So here it's a combination of private and public cloud. So I can give you an example, like you have a critical application running for finance. So that is very critical, where you have more security concern and you don't want to have that hosted in a public space. So in that case you will go and deploy that in your private cloud. Whereas you have some normal website where you publish your advertisements or your organization related information which is available for public, so that you will be hosting in a public cloud to reduce the cost of manageability. So this model calls hybrid cloud, where you are leveraging both private and public cloud features. So we can see a demonstration how it looks. So as you can see, in a public cloud it runs on someone else's data center, and I can say this is the least secure model if you are concerning about the security. Because why security? Because your entire data or infrastructure is managed by someone else, where you don't have any control over that. So you don't have control who is managing or how they are managing or whether they are accessing your data or not. So that's public cloud. So if you don't have that much of concern over your data or privacy or security, you may go and put it on public cloud. Whereas private cloud is as managed by entirely by yourself. Your data is only accessible by your own organization people or designated people to access that. So in that case it is more secure compared to public cloud. And as I told earlier, hybrid cloud is a mix of private and public. So where you'll put your most secure workload into your private cloud space, and which is least secure or you don't need that much of security concern on the application. So in that case you will put them into public cloud space, and this is the most common deployment model you will see in nowadays. So as we saw the deployment models, now we will be seeing what all are the service model available in cloud space. So there are three distinctive models available. First one is the infrastructure as a service. So what is that infrastructure as a service? In this service model, consumers are allowed to provision their computing resources by themselves, like that they will be deploying the instances or server and software on top of that, and also they will be managing the images for their server. Images means like that will be like template which you use to deploy your server or application. And then they will be also managing the storage, how much storage they need to add or reduce from the server, or if they want to have a separate networking like routing, some firewall capabilities and all those things. And also they will be managing the virtual RAM and virtual CPU. So if they want to add new RAM or new CPU, they will be doing by themselves. They don't need the help of cloud service provider in infrastructure as a service. So IaaS capability you will get it from both AWS, Azure, and also Google Cloud. So they are providing you infrastructure as a service. Whereas the second model available is the platform as a service, or you can say like PaaS. So in PaaS, it provides you the operating system and also the libraries and programming languages, where you just only access that platform to deploy your application. So suppose you have an application which require .NET, probably you can go with a PaaS solution, where cloud providers will give you a .NET platform to deploy your application. So you don't manage the underlying infrastructure, you don't need to think on that, you just only concentrate on the application part. Whereas the third option is software service. So here you no need to think of deployment or managing the application also. So that will be also handled via cloud provider, and you just consume that service. So in that it can give you a example, very good example, that is Gmail or your Outlook mail. So those are the example of software as a service, where your entire infrastructure or that mail infrastructure is managed by cloud provider, and you are just consuming that mail service. So you are paying how many accounts you are using accordingly, or how much storage and all the services you are using accordingly. You are not paying for underlying hardware or the software license and all those things. So you can see the demonstration here. So in IaaS, this is mainly for sysadmins. So they will be having that instance build up, and then they will be managing the infrastructure for those. So here you can have an example like AWS, then Rackspace. So those are the companies they are providing in IaaS space. Also Azure is also there. Then PaaS, in that this mainly for developers. So they will be only concentrating on the application stack. So they will be deploying the application and they will be developing that and configuring that. So PaaS is available on Azure also, AWS, Force.com, all these cloud providers. And SaaS is the last one, where it's for mainly for end customers. You don't need to think about the infrastructure or the application, you just consume the service. So in this case you can say like Gmail, Google Docs, Salesforce. So these are the example of SaaS model. So that's all. Thank you.